Hello, we are continuing our look at Proverbs. This time we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 5. God often compares his relationship to Israel and his relationship to the modern church with marriage. God is the husband, the church is his spouse, and God cares for his church, even though his church often runs away like an adulteress, like a whore, and goes after other gods and other things to love. And yet God maintains his love and his desire to have his church be holy and honored through all those things. Today, Solomon, who had many wives, so you always wonder him talking about marriage. Today in chapter 5, Solomon talks about marriage to his son. So let's go to chapter 5. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen well to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. Okay? So he's going to start out by saying, listen to this and learn from this so that you can stay in God's word and the wisdom that God teaches. And in this particular case, we're about to talk about that wisdom in our most important earthly relationship, our relationship to our spouse. 3. For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. So she sounds and looks good, right? She's attractive. But, and that's verse 4, in the end she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Externally, she looks really good. Internally, she is death. Okay? Your wife, she is really good. Some other woman, no, that's death. Which in 5 says it. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thoughts to the way of life. Her paths are crooked, but she knows it not. I once was working at a service station and I had a woman come in and I didn't know her. She came in and she started telling me about her affair with this married man and how she wanted him to leave his wife and all these things. And it was her boss. And it was just a terrible thing to hear. And she couldn't understand. There was nothing in her speech to me which seemed to realize the terrible results of this affair for, first of all, for the man's wife, but also for her and for the man, for all who are involved, because affairs, they have repercussions. And those repercussions abound immensely. Adultery causes turmoil, it causes chaos. We can look at so many divorces caused by adultery and just the chaos that results. And you can, it's obvious if you really want to look at it. But the people in the midst of these affairs don't look at it that way. They think this is good, this is pleasant, this is like oil and honey. They don't see that this leads to death and chaos. The man was never going to leave his wife, and even if he did, would you want to marry a man who would leave his wife? Would you trust him to be faithful to you? It's just all the extensions of these thoughts. When you betray, that betrayal leads to death, and it causes a death of love and a death of relationships. So we go to 7. Now then, my sons, so now he's speaking to many sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house. Okay, so here's a little bit of wisdom for us men. Don't put yourself into a situation where you're going to betray your wife, or before you're married, where you're going to betray your future marriage. Stay away from those dangers. They may seem like they might be pleasant, but the results of them are very dangerous, very awful. Mike Pence was made fun of for saying that he didn't go out alone with women who weren't his wife. This was the Billy Graham rule, and Pence applied it. Billy Graham applied it as well. And the idea was to stay away from this danger of sexual sin, not only because we men can fall into this. There, save the grace of God, go I. We are very weak when it comes to sexual sins. but also because our reputation can be hurt, even if we don't do anything or nothing happened. And for a third reason, because our spouse doesn't deserve to have to think in her head what might have happened, right? We don't ever want to give our spouse real reason to doubt, but nor do we want her to have to doubt. We want her always to know that she is the blessing of our heart, the apple of our eyes, that she is the one that we look on as our number one person after God, the person that we put ahead of our own life and our own pleasures. We want her to look at herself the way that we should see her, which is as a glorious, wonderful person and a gift of God. So here he's saying, keep away from the adulteress. Just don't go near her. It does no one any good when you put yourself in those situations. Verse 9, lest you give your best strength to others and your years to one who is cruel. So if you do go near her and she does entrap you, you're going to lose to her those things which could have been given to a much better situation, one which would have been good for you and good for your household and good for your family and good for your wife. So this joy that you find in your attraction to women is a joy that you could have been sharing with your wife and had a fruitful and wonderful marriage, and instead you're giving it away. And because she's an adulteress, that's actually going to go to her and maybe to other men. It's not yours anymore. 10, lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich another man's house. There it is again, not to talk about prostitution, but, your money going to someone else's. Anyway, a bad, bad situation. 11, at the end of your life you will groan when your flesh and spirit are spent. You will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers or listen to my instructors. I have come to the brink of utter ruin in the midst of the whole assembly. So when you're young, you didn't listen to the wisdom that was given you, and later on you're going to regret it. You're going to feel it in your bones because you're going to suffer the pains of the silly and foolish things that you did. You're going to feel it in your pocketbook because you're not going to have done those things which build up wealth, which make for a pleasant retirement, etc. And you're going to think, boy, if I had only listened to what my parents had taught me, to what my teachers had instructed me, how much better would life be now? Yes, death is going to come, but I can enjoy the goods that God gives in the present, and I am safe in the knowledge that God is going to keep me safe into the future. So there you go. That final line, I have come to the brink of utter ruin in the midst of the whole assembly. Your reputation destroyed, your wealth destroyed, and it's public. It's not private. And adultery does this. It makes for a public sin. It destroys not just the person and the people involved, but it causes a raft of destruction within society. And people look upon you and they think, what a fool. There was the governor, I believe, of South Carolina who had an affair with a woman down in South America, and he disappeared for a time from his governorship, and the whole world saw it. And they couldn't believe his foolishness that he would chase after this woman when he had a wonderful marriage. I define wonderful as being married to a woman that she would take you. She'd take a man and be willing to have her as part of her life. That's a wonderful gift. He gave it up, and he was a fool, and everyone knew it, and everyone saw the ruin that this brought upon his head, and it still affects him to this day, and his family to this day. We're going to stop there because we're at about 9:30, and we'll continue in the next video with the rest of chapter 5.